Christoph Trappe, welcome to the Marketing Study Lab podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Fantastic. So let's get straight into this with a random opener. Dead simple, dead short. Does spelling matter?
Does spelling matter? Absolutely. I mean, mistakes happen, quite frankly, and if you make a mistake, don't spend the next day worrying about it. I'll give you this example when it comes to spelling. Cathay Pacific, I think that's how you pronounce it, an airline, I think they're based in Hong Kong or somewhere in Asia, and they misspelled their own name on a plane. And oh my God, right? So, but you know what they did? They took a picture of the plane, they tweeted the picture, they said, oops, this is going back to the paint shop, and they were done with it.
Love it.
So if they can live down a spelling mistake like that, you don't have to worry about a spelling you can change in 5 seconds.
Yeah, I love that.
But of course, try to do your best not to have any spelling errors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, try your best in everything you do. And I think that's one thing I'm noticing, like the further I go in my career and the more I research and read and understand, is that even major organizations have issues and they do fail. And it's not something that you should shy away from. Embrace it and learn. Simple as that, really. Right. Christoph.
You know why I think people are so worried about spelling, quite frankly, and argue over it so much?
Go on.
I think it's because we have to perform today with content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's harder than it sounds. And if we focus our time on other stupid little debates, we wasting time. We didn't get to it. Peter, we didn't get to it. Sorry. Didn't perform because we had to argue over typo for 3 days. So just keep that in mind. Spelling matters, but if you're going to argue over typo or make somebody feel bad for 2 days, you're literally wasting time.
Yeah, love it. I love that kind of thought process as well. Definitely wasting time. Get it wrong and learn from it. Don't waste the time. So bit of a background to yourself, if you don't mind. What's the story that brings you to this stage of your career, and what are you up to right now?
Yeah, you bet. So I grew up as a journalist, covered sports early on, and then public safety and investigative reporting. Certainly, I learned how to connect with audiences back then, even though we didn't have digital as much as we do today. And then slowly moved over into video production and content marketing, digital marketing, those kind of things, more on the business side. And that's what I do today. How do you tell better stories? How do you stay in front of people? How do you stay relevant? And that is a good mix today of telling good stories, distribution, paid campaigns, all those different things. And that's what I do, right? And then the next step is I'm a big fan of how are you efficient with your content. So for example, I'm a big fan of the create once, publish everywhere model. So even on my own podcast, the business storytelling podcast, I try to, when I have people on, sometimes I live stream it. Now I'm testing to live stream to 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm literally having it up on my computer here, 4 channels at once. Then I take the audio off it. I put the audio on the 10 podcast channels, whatever they are. And then I write an article from the content, not always, but sometimes. And then I do paid campaigns and I do email campaigns. And so my point is, back in the day, we didn't have to worry about this, but today, the competition is just so out there for everything. How do you maximize what you're doing? How do you maximize the tools? And then how do you move forward? So that's basically what I do in my career. Try to help people stay relevant in whatever market they're in. And it's harder and harder and harder, quite frankly.
Absolutely. So what I thought we'd cover on this episode, actionable insights, if you like, into, because I think I've covered content creation quite a lot on this podcast, but creating a culture where content is primary and an absolute requirement of what you do, which, like you just said, it pretty much is in every industry, in every organization. I'd like to look at how we create that culture so everybody is almost responsible for creating this content or part of it. So how do we create a culture where content is first and foremost on our minds?
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, you got to think about what are you trying to accomplish? And I know everybody's looking for the silver bullet and how do you do everything quickly and how do you do, how do you get there quickly? And there's tricks on how to accelerate growth. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a good story, like, so we don't have to mention the companies, but even before we started going on air, we were talking about all the different live streaming apps
Mm.
that were out there. And there's so many, we couldn't even remember some of the names, right? And so at the end of the day, the competition is everywhere. And to stand out, what's your story? What are you going to talk about? What are you going to share? And then how do you get in front of people? So you really have to put that top of mind. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do ad campaigns. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do email marketing. We should do all those things, right? But we need to figure out what's the story, what's unique about us, how do we go and move faster and do that. And I did talk about in my book, Content Performance Culture, Content Performance Online, about how to do that. And you have to kind of put together that culture. And the first thing is you have to make up your mind that you want to tell better stories. You want to be more relevant. You want to stand out, right? And that's the first thing. And then you do need a team. And I always laugh when people, they want, we want the entry-level person at no cost to drive results like somebody who's done it for 10 years, and that doesn't mean new people to the industry can't drive results. They can, but it is harder and harder and harder, and things change so much. So you need a certain level of experience. And then the next thing is, we mentioned that already, you can't waste time on stupid stuff, right? You can't have dumb meetings. Like, you can't have things that don't make sense. So you have to have that as well. And then I'm kind of breezing through these things, quite frankly, here.
Sure.
But one of the things that I also talk about is the next play mentality. And so in sports, right, what do athletes do? Whether they're soccer players, football players, it doesn't make any difference. Baseball players, cricket, whatever. They run a play, and then when the play is over, they have to run another play. Whether the first play was good or bad doesn't make any difference. There's usually another play, right? Unless it's the end of the game. And same thing in marketing. Run the next play. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, that worked. For example, like lighting. I got lighting set up here. Oh, that lighting didn't work. I forgot to charge it. How do I do it now? Oh, you can just plug it in. Oh, that light is too little. Get a different light. Try something different. Go again. And that's what I loved about that Cathay Pacific example. They were just like, whoops, just whoops. And I know there's some marketing campaigns that are a little trickier to say whoops, like especially when you step on like racial sensitivities or some of those things. You should know better, but there's a lot of things where you literally can just say, oops, that didn't work, next play. And then move forward and don't make people feel bad about it. And give people room to try things and fail. And I think failing, which really means something didn't work, is part of a content performance culture, because stuff changes all the time, and you move forward.
Absolutely. I always say there's two good analogies with most things in life. That's surfing and baking a cake. Usually those two analogies can fit anywhere, but I also bring the sport into that and baseball. And I can't remember the stat, but if you look at baseball and hitters, they only hit the ball, I think, once every three out of 10 or something like that, or even worse than that. And
3 out of 10 times. Yeah.
3 out of 10 times. So 7 out of 10, they fail at what they're supposed to do. So, we shouldn't be afraid to fail at all in what we do. That said, I think within a lot of organizations, it's quite easy to end up being part of the machine. And in doing that, you end up stifling creativity, or potentially stifling creativity. Are there any processes we can utilize within our content creation to make it consistent, but also have that creativity?
Yeah. So first of all, you got to hire the right people. People who fit on the team, who can be creative. And then the next thing is you want to make sure the process doesn't stifle creativity. And the way that works is you can't send people through approval hell nonstop. And what I talk about when I mean approval, when I'm talking about approval hell, what I mean is, 29 people are approving things, and 24 of those people add no value. They don't know anything about the topic, or they're just editing for preference. Editing for preference is the biggest waste of time. It doesn't do anything. And the other thing that when you have too many approval processes is people don't even, they don't know what keywords you're going after, right? So for example, every time I talk to copywriters, they tell me we go for keywords that are like, between 80 and 200 monthly searches, which is relatively low if you think about it, but you have a chance to maybe rank for them. You don't have a chance to rank for the ones that have 70,000 searches in a month. And, so the people editing it, they don't know. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know what you're trying to go for. And so really minimize who gets approval, who doesn't get approval. My favorite story still is this. Why are, and I have good relationship with a lot of salespeople. We couldn't live without them, obviously. But why are salespeople without any marketing experience all of a sudden in charge of marketing? It's like the craziest thing I ever heard. I'm not in charge of sales. And I've actually sold some things, but I shouldn't be in charge of sales. So same thing. Why are salespeople now in charge of marketing? That's a different discipline, So make sure you make it easy for people to create things. Make sure you have a process, and also draw on the different strengths. Like the other day, I had somebody write something, and they're a writer. They're not a really truly a digital strategist. So somebody else updated their content to be really optimized for digital, right? Like with calls to action, other things. But their writing was probably 75% there, 80% there, which is fine. But we didn't just rip up the article and do that. So make it easy for people to create things. Don't strike down ideas. Stop thinking that you know everything just because you're the boss. Michael Brenner was on my show, the Business Storytelling Podcast, and he wrote "Mean People Suck," and nobody ever disagrees with that. And what's interesting about that concept is, what he's talking about is the era of the smart jerk needs to be over. And I agree with that. Now, there's a flip side to that, right? So I always like to say, I don't think I'm a jerk, but I joke now. And I say, I'm not hard to work with. I'm just hard to take advantage of. So, I have expectations of everybody on the team. I have expectations for me. So there's a fine line, are people just not meeting expectations, or are you really a jerk? But at the end of the day, even if you have expectations, set them in a way that gives people freedom to trying to reach them, and not nitpick and not micromanage everything along the way.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of sales and marketing working together, as we all should be. And it always, when I was in corporate, it always made me laugh when people it might be business development, it might be sales, and they should have an input because they're talking to customers, or they should be, at least they should have an input. But as a marketer, you want them to respect your expertise. And it always made me laugh when they came in and said, "Oh, could we just do this? Or how about this? Or how about that? Can't we just do this?" And my response to them, which they never really liked, is, couldn't you just sell more stuff? Couldn't you just go out and sell stuff? Because that's what you're there to do. And it's kind of that flippant comment that you speak to somebody in marketing, or can't you just create some content? Can't you just design a website? Can't you just do social? It's like, no, I can't. It's more strategic. It's more tactical than that. Can't you just go and sell stuff? Oh gosh, I can't just do that. I can't just sell. Aren't you there to do that? I always found that a funny conversation to have.
But everybody oversimplifies everything. It's always easier. Everything is easy that you don't have to do yourself.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And when people say, okay, let's do some content, and I'm like, there is so many different types of content today. So you really have to start with a goal, and then you have to move forward from there. But absolutely, stop oversimplifying. And here's the other thing. What's interesting, I was listening. So the NFL, the National Football League season, hopefully is happening this year in the United States. And a reporter was asking a football coach something about, that quarterback didn't do something correctly. And the coach says, well, You have to remember, you're watching the game like a fan. You only see what you see, but you don't know what actually happened. Like maybe the receiver wasn't where he was supposed to be, and
Mm.
the quarterback did everything correctly. So there's usually more to everything, right? It's not as simple as like, oh, let's go do it. Let's go create some content. What kind of content? Written, audio, video, So but it's certainly something people do, oversimplify things, and it's easier to point the finger, quite frankly, right,
Mm.
than own it yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, great sports analogy, and it happens all the time. It's what you don't see. It's especially in the NFL. It's so tactical. It's play by play. It's not. And same take cricket for example. I used to
Mm-hmm.
think cricket and some test matches last for 5 days if they don't get rained off, and a lot do in this country. But they last for 5 days. And I was speaking to a friend that really enjoys them, and I was saying, I don't understand it. They're just throwing a ball and hitting it or defending it or whatever they might be doing. And he said, yeah, but they might spend half an hour pitching the same ball to then throw the ball that's going to catch someone out. And it's like so tactical. You just don't know what's going on until somebody explains it, or you're in that area. Just on the NFL, do you have a team, by the way?
Yeah, so I watched the Washington, now we call them the Washington football team, which I still think they could have called them the Washington Football Club. In the US, there's very little confusion that it's soccer, quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly. Washington Redskins for a long time, but now they're rebranding. Of course, rebranding takes longer than a couple months, so I do think their decision to go with the Washington football team for a year and then pick a name in the next year makes a little bit more sense.
Mm.
Of course, what's interesting about them is it's so public. Everything is public. So if you've ever done a rebrand, think about how that would be if you do everything publicly. It would blow, right? It would be
Yeah.
a hard situation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't envy that situation. A really good experience, but I wouldn't want to be in that situation. Far from it. Just moving to a slight tangent then. Do you think everyone can create content, or you can train somebody to create better content?
Yeah, so I think it depends. I think everybody can create content to some extent. The biggest hurdle is what's your level of letting it go, right? So, for example, when I record my podcast, I tell guests right away. I said, yes, we can edit it, and we might, but don't plan on it, right? So why do you need to sit there and go, oh, Christoph said right, like for the eighth time in a sentence? Why do you need to cut that out? Why do you cut out an or like I misspoke earlier, right? I said the wrong word and then I corrected myself right away. Why do you need to edit that? Like, what a waste of time. I mean, I had
Mm-hmm.
people before and they were like, oh, can you edit out my cough? And like, yes, you can, but how dumb? Like, seriously, you know. So any expert really can go out and record a podcast. I mean, it's so easy today,
Mm-hmm.
or a video. I mean, look at this. I got the little ring light from my daughter, my 12-year-old. I got the phone, which is set up on 3 books, and I mean, it's easier than ever, right?
Yeah.
And I could actually use. I got like the cemetery of unused equipment over there, which has a couple tripods in it, so I could use that. But it works on the books, right? It's about the right height, and I don't have to look up. It's fine. So anybody can do that. I think the audio and video makes it easier. Writing, I think, is harder because we're taught to overthink writing. Honestly, I think when we're in school, you overthink it, and then it just we're trying to be too perfect. It's really hard to fake it when you're on video or audio, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
just this is how you look, this is how you sound. People can make their own conclusion, right? If they like you or not. But anybody can do that. I mean, any expert can do that. Any expert can turn it into a podcast. I mean, podcasting so easy now. I mean, I literally record them in one app, and then it goes out almost automatically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy. I can't even keep up writing articles for every podcast, quite frankly. So, um, you know, but are there some people who are better storytellers? For sure. But if you can get over that hump, I think a lot more people than give themselves credit can do it.
Mm-hmm. So just on the same topic, do you think everybody's got a book in them then?
Does everyone have a book in them? Probably. What's interesting about writing a book today is, so if you're creating content, and if you're writing, or even if actually, Jared Johnson did this. He's the healthcare rapper. I don't know what his website is. Jared Johnson, the healthcare rapper. You should find him if you Google him.
Okay.
But he did. He had a podcast, and then he literally took all the podcast conversations and wrote a book from them. So every chapter was a different podcast episode, which is kind of interesting. You still have to write it. You know, what I did with all of my books, they're basically, all the content comes from my blog. So I've been writing and writing and writing. Like this year, 2020, you know, I got 140,000 words or something like that already. You know, that's like 3 books. I mean, granted, they're not all aligning by topic, you know, but I could probably find a topic to turn that into a book again. So as long as you're writing, as long as you're creating content, you can always turn that into a book. And if you're doing a business book, nonfiction book, that probably will get you 75% of the way there. But yeah, so, but here's the key when it comes to books. The writing the book is the easy part. The hard part comes to trying to promote it, right? Because there's a lot of books on Amazon, and there's so just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing you stumbled upon then, and a few times you mentioned it about storytelling and things like that. And I'm interested to get your take on creating content, valuable content that will help a business, but also incorporating that storytelling element into that. How do we go about that?
Well, you have to find stories that your audience cares about. So if you just write about how this is us and us and us, and here's how awesome we are, nobody cares how awesome you are. Tell them what problem you can solve. How do you solve it? And go from there. That's really the biggest thing. It's so much easier to just talk about ourselves. We're so awesome. This is how we do it. And please share stories about what you do, right? But you got to tie it back to, here's the problem you're facing. And you know, and when it comes to storytelling, like some companies, they don't buy into it right away. And the problem sometimes is they don't realize what problem it solves for them. And the problem it solves for them is they're staying relevant, or they're becoming relevant, and they're staying in front of people. And you know, I had one company actually said to me one time, they weren't interested in storytelling or content marketing. They really just wanted leads. And I'm like, well, so does everybody. But to get leads, you have to stay in front of people, right? I mean, it's like, I don't know if you probably haven't seen this, but there's a Subway commercial. I don't even eat at Subway, but you know, the $5 foot long, right? It's like $5, that's at $5, blah, 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 foot long. You know, it's like total, like I can't even sing, and I can't sing that song. And so it's really like they're always in front of you, right? And it's the same model. Will I buy a $5 footlong at Subway anytime soon? I don't know, but it reminds me of them, right? When I'm like, oh, I'm hungry, where do I want to go? And it's the same model right here when it comes to content. You want to stay in front of people, you want to stay relevant. And if you're not Subway or a big company like that, you know, you have to tell even a different story and be more relevant out of the gate for sure.
Yeah, love that. That's excellent. Okay, Christoph, are you ready for some quick fire questions then?
Okay.
Here we go. What's that source of information you can't live without? What's your go-to source?
I mean, I look at Twitter most days, and of course it's kind of a fire hose of news, but you know, that's kind of where, you know, you can do topics, so that's even more interesting.
Cool. What's the last thing you remember Googling?
Last thing I remember Googling, oh, I don't know. That how do you remember that? I couldn't even remember. I'm pretty sure I did something yesterday last night here. So we're recording this really early my time. And maybe I Googled something this morning. Do people ever remember what they Googled last?
Yeah, bizarrely enough, yeah. I don't know whether they look it up previously or whatever it might be, but yeah, it's strange. I mean, like if somebody asked me that, I'm not quite sure I would be able to answer it, to be fair. What did I last look up? I cannot remember. So
I think,
bit of,
yeah, I think they have to look it up. But the problem is there's so many devices now. Which device was it? And then, does Siri count? I don't know. I mean, according to my iPad, I looked up average weather and average temperature in Phoenix in March. So
okay.
there you go.
There you go. Excellent, cool stuff. I'm friends with somebody in Phoenix, and it's been really warm in Phoenix, I think, hasn't it? The last month or so.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. It's been like record breaking. Anyway, off on a tangent there. If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know. You always learn things. I mean, I don't know if I don't know. Keep going, right? Don't listen to the haters. Understand people's agendas. It's like, for example, if you're a high performer and somebody's really trying to put you down, are they putting you down because you really deserve it, or are they putting you down so you give up and they can take your spot, for example? I think that's hard to remember and understand as a 10-year-old, and sometimes even as a 30-year-old or 40-year-old.
I left a average review on a podcast a few months ago, and the actual person got in touch with me and said, was it nice of them? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, they asked why I'd put that review, but then they went on to say, is it because you want your podcast to rank higher? And I'm like, I didn't even know that would be a possible thing, and not at all. It's just my opinion. But that thought process of just having that thought, I just thought was a little bit, wow. Well, obviously, you've had that thought that could be a tactic, but it wouldn't cross my mind. But anyway, let's talk about getting ahead.
Well, I mean, I think that's interesting. People probably do that, but so here's my opinion online, and sometimes I get slack for that. Actually, I think I mentioned this on the Hardcore Marketing podcast when Casey Cheshire interviewed me, and we were talking about. I said, online, I don't even get into I'm very careful when I respond to people and when I even engage, right? Because first of all, whose opinion have you changed by arguing with them online? Nobody, right? And usually, if people left a review, do they really want to have a discussion about it? That's crazy, right?
I know.
When somebody I tweet like a soundbite or something, and somebody will say, "Can you elaborate on this?" And I'm like, "No," because that's literally all I want. I don't say no, right? I just don't respond. But I'm like, "No," because if I wanted to expand on it, I would have expanded on it on the first thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, I just
people
thought,
can't take it too far.
Yeah, I mean, if I got negative reviews, it's not for them, fine. I'm really not bothered.
Right.
And it certainly isn't a tactic. Go into every single marketing podcast and leave a negative review so mine looks better. Come on. It's just hilarious anyway. On that topic, what's the most important thing to know about marketing right now?
I mean, the most important thing is to learn as much as you can and learn how to apply it to different verticals. And so I'm still amazed, Peter, when I go and I talk to companies and they say, have you used this tool before? And that's like their one and only qualification to work with them. Have you used this one tool? And I'm like, if that was really the case, honestly, there's so many tools, you can always disqualify people. And it's not, so I think what happens is these are old school thinkings. So back in the day, people would say, have you used this tool? But they only were like 2 or 3 tools to use. Do you know what I mean? So that made sense. But today, when you look at, Scott Brinker's MarTech landscape, it's like 7,000 tools. You can't use them all. And honestly, all you need to know is how to do email marketing, how to do SEO, if you use WordPress, for example, 80% of your SEO is already good out of the gate. You only need to focus on your content. So learn the right things and then adjust quickly and apply them to whatever system companies use. It doesn't make any difference whether you use tool A or tool B. We don't want to name any here, but be a strategist and then go from there. There's some HR people who strongly disagree with that, but again, they're HR people. They're not this. They're like the salespeople trying to run marketing all of a sudden. So I don't mean to be too strong about it, but it's it's not about the tool. It's about, are you a strategist? Do you know how to implement it, and go from there.
I completely agree with you there. Well, 100%. It's almost like saying, it's taking it back to a Victorian age, if you like, of you work in a factory. Can you use this tool? And it was literally yes or no. And if it was a no, you can't work in the factory, I'm afraid, or you're going to have to learn. Backwards thinking, in my opinion, as well. So final question, most important question. If people want to find out more about yourself, everything that you do, your book, your podcast, all that kind of thing, where should they go?
Yeah, feel free to check out my blog, authenticstorytelling.net. LinkedIn is always fine. Feel free to connect with me there. Make sure you mention you saw me on the podcast. Don't tell me you want to sell me something. Haha. Lots of sales things happening on LinkedIn currently. Twitter is always fine as well. C-Trap. And of course, the Business Storytelling Podcast. You can ask Siri play Christoph Trappe, the Business Storytelling Podcast. So always voice strategy is something near and dear to my heart, to see how that evolves. It has a way to go, quite frankly, but it's interesting to see how it's already evolving. So always appreciate people connecting. Always, Peter, of course, appreciate you having me on the show and making the time. Thank you so much.
Oh, final thing for me to say then, taking the words out of my mouth, Christoph Trappe, thank you so much for joining me today. An absolute pleasure.
You bet. Thank you.